After a weekend of reflection, I legitimately think Carolina turned over a new leaf at last week's battle for Atlantis as opposed to last year's PK85. My question now, who's the starting five?
You are Locked On Tar Heels, your daily podcast on the UNC Tar Heels, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, it's Monday, November 27th, 2023. Welcome into the Locked On Tar Heels podcast, the only daily North Carolina show out there. I'm your host, Isaac Schade, and I want to thank you everydayers for making Locked On Tar Heels your first listen or watch to get your Tar Heels content every day. This episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Folks, I want to remind you that we've got a brand new Discord going on, the Locked On Tar Heels Discord. The link to come join us is in the show notes on audio and video. Seriously, we're having a blast. There's a game thread going through every basketball and football game. Great conversations about all things Carolina and anything else random under the sun. Would love to have you there. Coming up on the show today, we're going to talk about Carolina basketball, some good, a few areas of concern that I'd like to see the Tar Heels grow in, as well as football and where we're at and some thoughts there and a few other just of the weekend whip around with what's going on in Carolina athletics. So let's start by just going back to the battle for Atlantis for a hot minute. Actually, I should say, as I'm recording in real time, the men's soccer team is in extra time against Hofstra in the Sweet 16. It's knotted at 2 right now. That'll be one of the parts of the weekend whip around. I'll keep you up to date with the news on that. Okay, basketball. At some point, I had discussed, basically Battle for Atlantis was the potential of being deja vu to last year's PK85. Carolina was on a slippery slope to doing the exact same thing, winning, first one, losing, and then losing again. Thankfully, they beat Arkansas and things are in a better place. Well, my question was, will it be the same or will Carolina turn a new leaf? After thinking more on it, thinking back to how Carolina played, the things they did, I say new leaf. And I'm all in on it's a new leaf. Given the benefit of several more days to think on it, I'm encouraged. Carolina obliterated Northern Iowa in the second half. Frankly, should have beaten Nova. They didn't, and so no excuses there, but still. And then I thought they did work against Arkansas, a talented but not yet really cohesive Arkansas team that's going to beat a lot of people this year once they get it together. We'll find out even more as we keep progressing, but right now, I say new leaf and I am encouraged. Last year, I worried that maybe Carolina didn't necessarily have enough talent. Now, I think there might be, I'm going to say too much, but I don't mean that in oh, we're the best and we're going to kill her. I just mean it's actually harder to figure out how to apportion minutes now because you feel so good about so many of the players. For example, and here's the main part of this conversation I want to have. I'm struggling to decide at this point which starting lineup I like the best. And I know it's ultimately not about the first five. It's about who gets the starters minutes and who the closing five are, those kind of things. But just like in baseball, you can't get to your closer without a quality start or a quality middle innings, all of that. So in terms of the starting five, there are 6 guys that make sense to me. I'm curious to hear what you would think too, who you would feel comfortable being in the starting lineup and then whittling it down from there. The 6 for me are RJ Davis, Elliot Cadeau, Cormac Ryan, Harrison Ingram, Jae'lyn Withers, and Armando Bacot. Different guys I'll feel differently about for the season, but right now, those are the 6 that I would say at any point of the season, I would feel great about them starting. Out of those 6, for me, there are 3 no-brainers and then 3 others to debate on a little bit. The no-brainers, again, I'd love to hear your thoughts, are RJ Davis, Harrison Ingram, and Armando Bacot. I think what each of those 3 brings is a non-negotiable for being in the starting lineup, game in and game out, assuming health. I don't care about matchups or anything else. Those 3 guys have to be in the starting lineup. Beyond there, at this point, Cormac Ryan would be my 4th most certain to be in the starting lineup because of all his experience, because of his moxie, because of his competitive edge, his will to win, because he's that guy that you love to have on your team that you hate when he's on the opposition. He's defensively willing and capable. He's a shot maker. He's able to get to the rim. He's got good positional height. I like it. So I would put him fourth behind those guys. And then that brings it ultimately down. I should say, though, I'm willing to hear an argument against Cormac in favor of Elliot and Jae'lyn Withers. But right now, that's where I'm at. So for me, then it comes down to, do you start Elliot or do you start Jae'lyn Withers? Let me give you the Jae'lyn Withers pro and con. For me, the pro is his athleticism, his ability to get to the hoop, his ability to hit from the outside, but not having to do it at the same level he did at Louisville. And him being at the 4, this is perhaps the most critical for me, allows Harrison Ingram to be at the 3, which is where you get that extreme mismatch that he's going to have on just about every other small forward. The cons with Jae'lyn Withers in the starting lineup, he's a little too like switchy, eager beaver at sometimes, and gets in a little bit of trouble with the dribble or things of that nature. Like, I just don't always trust him with the ball in his hands. Like, a lot of times he's making a good move, but if he has to dribble a lot and do that, I'm not with it. I think there's going to be some turnovers. With Elliot, the pros, he is already 6 games in, starting to show why Elliot Cadeau is Elliot Cadeau, right? You're starting to see his incredible play, his next level athleticism, his speed, his burst, his competitive nature. I think he is a better defender than I realized, able to wall off and do other things. We'll get to the fouling in a little bit, but in Atlantis, those 3 games, 11 assists, 1 turnover. His shooting starting to come around, and it's there. It's just he hadn't been hitting the first couple games. Now, the con with Elliot, obviously, is he's a freshman, and it shows at times, while the rest of these guys all have a ton of college basketball experience. So when it comes down to it for me, RJ, Harrison, and Armando, check, no brainers. I would go with Cormac, and right now, I would go with Jae'lyn Withers as well, so that Harrison can play the 3, so that you give Elliot a couple minutes to see the game unfold, kind of get his bearings, and then come in. I just think that would do him well at this point in his career. I'm not saying it's that all season. I'm just saying right now. But here's the best news about this whole conversation. To me, there are 6 dudes I legitimately feel comfortable with, that I legitimately think should be getting 20+ minutes a game. And then beyond those 6, I would give Jalen Washington and Seth Trimble 12 to 15 a game. Seth's been shooting well. His defense has taken a step forward. His confidence offensively has taken a step forward. Jay Wash looks healthy. He's doing stuff. Beyond that, I would give Paxson about 8, Zayden about 5 or so. And the prevailing thought in college basketball is that you need 8 guys. You need 8 guys who you can really, really rely on game in and game out. Carolina has that. Those 6 starters I mentioned, plus Jalen Washington and Seth Trimble. And then you've got Paxson and you've got Zayden for the moments when you need them. I think they should be getting time every game. I think we'll continue to see 9-10 guys get first half minutes just about every game. And then the second half, just depending on game flow. And so you get those 8 guys, and then you allow Paxson and Zayden to play important spot minutes. And I think that puts Carolina in a great place. Now, all this said, it doesn't mean that Carolina is not going to lose more games in the non-conference. Because again, this non-conference schedule is loaded. Loaded, I tell you. They've got Tennessee Wednesday, UConn, Kentucky, an Oklahoma team that's a lot better than any of us thought would be preseason. So while I'm saying I feel encouraged and I think Carolina has turned over a new leaf, that doesn't mean they won't run through the rest of the non-con unscathed. They could easily lose to Tennessee at home on Wednesday. I hope it would at least be competitive, but I would not be shocked. Tennessee's coming off 2 losses in Maui, where they lost to Purdue and Marquette, who are going to be my number 1 and 2 teams in my top 25 this week. So Tennessee is foaming at the mouth to get back in the win column. So just don't jump ship or don't disagree with what you see and feel right now just because Carolina might lose another one of these games. I'm telling you, they're probably going to. But you need to know that I feel good, and I like the pieces that Carolina has, and I think they fit together really, really well. Man, just keep riding that Harrison Ingram like unreal. I love what he's doing. All right, all of that said, there are a few things that I wouldn't say like I'm like, oh no, the sky is falling, but just some concerns that I saw in Atlantis for last week that I want to point out and think about what that might mean for Carolina. We'll talk about that in just a second, right after I tell you that this episode of Locked On Tar Heels is brought to you by Game Time. Hey, we've got the inaugural ACC SEC Challenge coming up tomorrow, Tuesday, and on Wednesday. The Tar Heels played Tennessee on Wednesday, like we just talked about. Perhaps you're realizing that you want to go to one of those games, but you don't have tickets. Hey, good news. You're in luck because of Game Time, the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater events near you at a last-minute moment. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their best price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. You shouldn't have to worry about when you're buying tickets to your next big event, and thankfully, Game Time's got you covered. Game Time has deals on tickets right up to the start of the event and even an hour after it starts. It's the place to find all your last-minute seats. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Again, create an account and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Terms apply. Download Game Time today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Okay, we saw a lot of good things last week at Battle for Atlantis. I know obviously you would love to have gone undefeated, but 2-1 and 1 overtime loss to a really good Villanova team, I'm A-okay with. But I do have some concerns, and I just want to kind of walk through 3 of them. There are more, and I'm sure you have more. I'd love to hear some of your concerns and some of the things you'd like to see changed. We could even hop in our Discord and talk about it. That's what it's so great for. We'd love to chat with you there. The first of which was the defensive adjustments, or frankly, the lack thereof, particularly against Villanova. Until the very bitter end of regulation, like the last 70 seconds or so of regulation, Carolina was content to just let Villanova run this ISO, post up, clear out one side and let a dude go to work when they would get a mismatch or just felt good about a specific matchup that they had. And Carolina was content to just sit back and let it play out one-on-one. The problem was Villanova was converting these possessions at a ridiculously high rate, which made me irate. Nice. You see what I did there? But Villanova used it again and again, particularly with Eric Dixon, who had an insane game, and Justin Moore, who is looking better and better coming back from injury. So happy for him, but I hated it for Carolina last week on Thanksgiving Day. Finally, though, in that last minute of regulation, Carolina decided to double, and it paid off both times. The first of these, Nova's up 68-65 with the ball. Just over a minute to play. Justin Moore, they've isolated Paxton Wojcik, understandably so. Cormac Ryan eventually comes over to double. They start to swing the ball. Carolina recovers Elliot, RJ Mondo. They help, and then they recover. Cormac gets back. Great rotation, and it winds up in a missed 3 from the left wing. Then on the ensuing play for Carolina, that's the play where Cormac Ryan got the game-tying 3. Still about 34 seconds for another possession for Villanova, 68 all. Same thing. They isolate Paxton Wojcik on Justin Moore. Mondo comes to double this time. Elliot shows over to Eric Dixon, who was at the top of the key, has to take a deep 3. It's a good look, but it misses. Carolina gets the rebound and has one more shot. They don't obviously get it off and go to overtime. But finally, Carolina doubles, and it works out. Now, here's the thing. Sometimes when you double, you're going to get beat. They're going to hit a shot. But the shots they were having to take in each of those last 2 possessions were much more low percentage than the shots they were getting in those one-on-one ISO situations. So while they're scoring at an extremely high rate in ISO, you might as well double, recover well, and force a lower percentage shot from a non-Eric Dixon, non-Justin Moore player. Think about, like, I don't know if you watched Maui last week. Did you see the way Marquette was flying around, doubling, recovering as they were trying to deal with Zach Edey from Purdue? It was a thing of Shaka Smart havoc beauty, and I loved it. But Carolina can do that. They have the depth, they have the athletes to pull that off. Now, we talked about it last week, but I love that Carolina started using Harrison Ingram with it, particularly against Arkansas, But I was really disappointed in Carolina's unwillingness or inability from the coaching staff to make those double teaming adjustments earlier in the game. Had they done so, Carolina definitely might have won. I don't like to just sit back and let the action come at me. Take it to Villanova. Make them make a play. Now, Tremont Mark for Arkansas had a similarly ridiculous game to Dixon on Friday in the game against Arkansas. In that scenario, it was just him making tough shots. Carolina, I thought, did a better job of trying different defenders, trying different defensive approaches with him. So I was much better with that. It was just the not attacking the isolation plays that Villanova was creating. That's what frustrated me. So that's one. The second thing that I have some concern with was Carolina's free throw shooting, particularly in the final two games of Battle for Atlantis. As a team, Carolina right now is shooting 75.2% for the season in all 6 games. That's great. That's right in between where they've been the last 2 years, which have been 2 of the highest free throw team percentages in Carolina history. 74.2% last year, 76.4% the year before. Carolina right now is right in between those two. So I love that. I'm all in on that. But in these 2 games against the high major opponents, Villanova and Arkansas, Carolina did not shoot as well. Against Villanova, 69.6%. They were 16 of 23. Against Arkansas, they were 71.4%, 25 of 35. You love getting to the line all that much, but you got to convert and you got to make it happen. Combined, the Villanova and Arkansas game, Carolina shot 70% or 41 of 58 in total. That's like 5 percentage points down from their season average. That's not going to cut it in these type of games. I mean, you make 2 more against well, heck, 1 more, you win in regulation, right? And I know that's all of those what ifs that we get into in sports. Fine, whatever, great. But if I told you, hey, Armando Bacot is shooting 85.7%, which he is right now, from the free throw line, given what Carolina has done around him, even as he's been sub 70 the past couple years, you would think, oh my word, the Tar Heels must be going bonkers from the free throw line. Well, they are with some of the key guys. Armando, 85.7 most attempts. RJ, 91.3% after his 10 of 10 from the free throw line against Arkansas. Of course, that means the rest of the team was 15 of 25. That ain't it. And Cormac Ryan shooting 93.3%. All of those are great. But then you've got Harrison Ingram, 56.5%. Elliot Cadeau, 52.6%. Jalen Washington, 61.1%. Seth Trimble, 64.3%. Those 4 guys combined are shooting 58.1% while taking just shy of half of Carolina's free throws. They've got to step up. And none of them are great career free throw shooters. I know we don't know Elliot's career free throw shooting percentage yet because he's a freshman. But Harrison Ingram, Jalen Washington, Seth Trimble, none of them have good career free throw percentages. They've all got to step up and match what Armando's doing, match what RJ's doing, and match what Cormac Ryan. And I say match, just, grow by 5 percentage points. Carolina's winning a lot more basketball games. You cannot leave free points at the free throw line. All right, the third thing that a bit of an area of concern at Battle for Atlantis, and I'm curious if it is a season thing or a context of Atlantis thing. And you'll hear what I mean in just a second. This is why it's an area of concern, but I'm not like, in the 2 games that Carolina played against high major opponents, meaning teams from one of the Power 6 conferences, they had 30 fouls against Villanova or Arkansas and 24 in the other. I forget which was which, but 54 combined fouls in those 2 games. By comparison, remember that was 30, and 24. In the first 4 games of the season, 11 fouls against Radford, 8 fouls against Lehigh, 13 fouls against UC Riverside, and 18 fouls against Northern Iowa. Never topped 18, and then they were at 24 and 30 against the 2 high major opponents they played. So here's my question with that. Is that a product of playing better opponents that are more athletic, and so you end up fouling more because you're not playing your defense that worked against 4 mid-majors isn't working against the high majors? Is it a product of the Atlantis reffing? Because you heard me say the game against Northern Iowa was also one of the 3 highest. So the 3 pre-Atlantis games, 3 lowest fouls that Carolina had committed, 3 Atlantis games, the most fouls they've committed. So maybe it's the refs down there. Was it a product of the higher level of competition? I think it's somewhere in between, to be honest with you. I think some of it is the higher level of competition. I think some of it is the reffing. However, if it is the reffing, just like a baseball player having to adjust to a certain umpire strike zone, basketball players have to adjust to the way a certain basketball game is being reffed. So if you know they're calling these kind of fouls, stop doing it, right? Like, you have to be able to read and react to that. So that would be my takeaway with that, but it is an area of concern. So we'll watch it with these other high major opponents coming up. Now, here's the other thing. I mentioned it about Elliot Cadeau earlier. He fouled out in both of those games against power conference teams, fouled out against Villanova and fouled out against Arkansas. So he is going, thankfully he's got a couple days now to come back to the mainland, get his mind situated around that, watch film, talk to coaches. He's going to be fine. He's a good enough athlete that he doesn't need to foul, and he's got to pick his moments, right? And he'll get there. Again, that's one of the things about being a freshman. You just got to learn. This is wholly different than high school. So those are my 3 areas of concern right now. Obviously, we could pick and choose others, but those are 3 of the biggest: the defensive adjustments, the free throw percentage, and the fouling. We'll see where it goes next. All right. Obviously, Saturday, very disappointing loss at NC State, essentially a no-show for the Tar Heels. We're not going to unpack the game in some of the similar ways we're going to, but I just want to talk about where are we at and what's going on and how do we move forward. We'll do that in just a second. Right after I tell you that this episode of Locked On Tar Heels is brought to you by FanDuel. Hey, as the weather gets colder, the NFL offers are staying hot on FanDuel. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 money line bet. That's $150 if your team wins. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action than right now. The app is super easy to use, and they've got a wide range of betting options like spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. For example, you can bet on the conference wins for basketball teams. Like North Carolina, the over-under for their ACC wins is set at 13.5 on FanDuel. You look at the ACC, I'm feeling really good that Carolina can hit the over on that. So maybe you want to go grab the over. I wouldn't doubt it. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and get in on the action this NFL season. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. All right, let's move to talking about football. Again, I'm not going to unpack this game in totality because I think that does nothing but just drudge up all the frustrations of reffing and other things that we just, it's not fruitful right now, because all you got left is a bowl game that you're waiting on to find out next weekend after the conference championship games are played. Right now, it's time to start saying, okay, this tells me everything I need to know about what Carolina needs to do. This season, they have played 12 football games. They scored 30 or more points in 9 of those 12 games. And in those 9 games, they were 8-1, the lone loss being to Georgia Tech. In Carolina's other 3 games, they scored under 3 points. The Tar Heels were 0-3 in those 3 games. That was Virginia, Clemson, and NC State. So I was seeing Saturday night after the game, people talking about, oh, Carolina's offense is letting us down. They're doing all these things. You guys, this is one of the elite offenses in the entire nation. This is not on the offense for not getting going. Keep in mind, NC State, while you wish it wasn't true, is a phenomenal defense. Carolina's issue is on the defensive side of the ball. Not that there aren't offensive issues, but I mean, think you're without Kobe Paysour, you're without Nate McCall. All of this is true. I do not want to hear anything about the offense. What I do need to figure out is what to do about the defense, because basically if Carolina can't score 30 or more points, they're going to lose the football game. That is not how to make up a football team. Per Greg Barnes from Inside Carolina, NC State had 504 yards of total offense on Saturday night. That part's not per Greg Barnes. That's just the fact. But NC State's 504 yards of total offense were its most against a Power 5 defense since 518 against Louisville in 2018. It has been now 2 years of this kind of stuff, and it's got to get better. So what do these things lead to? The fact that you got to score 30 or more to win. The fact that Louisville whose offense is just, NC State, whose offense is just not good, is doing this. I think it's time to move on from Gene Chizik. And I hate to say that. You know me as someone who preaches patience. You know me as someone who is like, hey, let's let this play out. Let's let it ride. But it's time to move on. I hate it, and I wish it wasn't true. But it is stopping North Carolina from doing what they can do. I see this almost in like a Caleb Love sort of way, where I think it's just ultimately better for both parties to just split ways, right? Like, I think Carolina basketball is going to be better this year, and I think Caleb Love's going to have a great year and is off to a good start at Arizona. I think ultimately it's better for Gene Chizik to go be somewhere else, and I think it's better for Carolina to bring in new, fresh defensive coordinator blood. I'm not ready to just like dive into anyone and everyone who we should be going after, but I mean, you just start looking at like IU fired Tom Allen on Sunday, Indiana. He's a DC. Let's go get him, right? You got all these possibilities. It's just time. Sometimes you just got to do something different. And I hate to say it. I hate to say it, but it's that moment. Maybe you wholeheartedly disagree with me. Great. I would love to hear why. I'd love to hear why for those of you that agree with me. I'd love to hear why you feel this way. It's just sometimes you got to call it what it is and move on. And this, for me, is that time. Speaking of it, going back to like, don't put this on the offense. I saw somebody on, it was either Saturday night or Sunday during the day, calling Drake May soft, didn't have good leadership capability. Are you freaking kidding me? Drake May soft? This dude has put this team on his shoulders for 2 years, is in the ballgame, in pain, and doing everything he needs to do for this team. He's a great leader. Everyone wants to rally around him. I got no time and no room for any remotely Drake May slander. If that's you, I'd love to have a conversation about it. But no, nothing with that. By the way, speaking of coaches changing things, Mike Elko to A&M, I think it's a great fit. He was there before he came to Duke, but also he's a great football coach. For the Tar Heels' sake, I'm very happy to see him leave Durham, North Carolina. So Mike Elko, thank you and goodbye. A quick weekend wrap up, just 3 specific things. I already mentioned men's soccer. We'll check back in on that score here in just a second. Women's basketball, unfortunately, finished the Gulf Coast Showcase 1-2. Their last game wrapped up just before I started recording. They beat Vermont on Friday, 54-51, lost to K-State on Saturday, 56-63, and played Florida Gulf Coast on Sunday. A back-and-forth affair, both teams taking a lead. Carolina led the most of the fourth quarter, slim margin, but they were winning. And then FGCU gets a layup with 7 seconds left, and then a Deja Kelly jumper misses ballgame. So Carolina coming back home, going to have to regroup because they got some big, you talked about the men's team and their non-con schedule. The women are in the same boat. Women's soccer. Oh, so painful. We're up 3-0 at halftime, scored 3 goals in the first 20 minutes of the match. I mean, it felt so eerily similar to UCLA just scoring in the last little bit there of the national championship game last year and then ultimately beating the Tar Heels. BYU scored 4 times in the final 30 minutes, including 2 goals within 73 seconds of each other in the 81st and 82nd minutes. That's tough. And then the game winner at 88-20. So you're in the final 2 minutes of the match. And oh man, brutal. This is brutal. And then men's soccer. We mentioned it earlier, but the Tar Heels we're playing Hofstra on Sunday in real time as I'm recording this in the Sweet 16. Hofstra was up 2-1 late. Carolina gets an equalizer in the 86th minute, so equally brutal for Hofstra like Carolina women's team. And then let's look to see. I think extra time was just about done, so I'm guessing it went to PKs. Let's look and see. Oh, the Tar Heels hit all 5 of their penalty kicks in the PKs. So Carolina's moving on to the Elite Eight. Great stuff there for the Tar Heels. Congrats to the fellas as they move on. That's it for today's episode of Locked On Tar Heels. Thanks so much for joining us. Want to remind you again, come join us in the Discord. We'd love to have conversations with you there. It's so fun, seriously. If you'd like to have a different kind of conversation, you can email the show, lockedontarheels@gmail.com. Don't forget to subscribe on video and audio. Smash the like button so we know you're here. And leave your comments as we discussed earlier. Want to remind you, it's always a great day to be a Tar Heel. Even when it's a sad day, it's a great day to be a Tar Heel. We'll be back with you tomorrow. But until then, peace.